Welcome to this special interview with Mr. Govindh K. Bharathan, who came from India for the launch of our book, Living Together. Mr. Bharathan is a specialist in Hinduism. He is a very senior lawyer in the Kerala High Court. But today, I thought we will discuss few aspects of Hinduism for the benefit of the Sri Lankan viewers. He agreed very kindly just before leaving the country to give this very special interview to Art TV. Welcome to this program, Mr. Bharathan.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bharathan, in other religions, we identify a founder or a messenger, a prophet, but in Hinduism we don't hear of such a founder or a prophet or a messenger. Could you elaborate and tell us where does this begin?
Deepal, the very concept of the word Hindu truncates the principle of Hinduism. I would prefer to call it Sanatana Dharma, the Dharma which always existed and which will continue to exist in any form that Hinduism takes at the moment. Now, the concept is that Hinduism of Sanatana Dharma, as I call it, from its very essence, cannot have a person from whom it emerges. Unlike Christianity, Christ, Buddhism with the Buddha, the concept is that once the human mind rose above sensory restrictions and touched the fringes of the absolute, the mind itself came out with certain sounds, certain vibrations, which at first it could not understand because it had never been experienced before. When you get a person from the village and he comes to town and touches an electric cord and gets a shock, if you ask him what was his reaction, he would probably mumble all sorts of incoherencies. In the same way, when the human mind touched the fringes of the absolute in the form of the divine, he came out with certain sounds and mumblings, which was the origin of the Vedas. Now, mind you, this is not accidental. When you reach that level, whatever you say becomes the absolute truth. That is the Vedas. And in the Vedas, these sounds first sound very jumbled to us because we have never heard it before and we have to experience it. These sounds are sometimes repetitive. Ultimately, it was discovered, I'm cutting short because of the time limit. Ultimately, it was discovered that when certain of these sounds were used under particular circumstances, tremendous effects came out of it. In other words, when you chant a mantra and you have a purificatory fire and you offer into the fire certain oblations, the color of the flame must be correct, the temperature of the fire must also be correct, the amount of smoke arising must also be correct. Then the mantra along with these things in the yaga gave tremendous effects. Effects means wish fulfilling first to start with. So, if you wanted to have prosperity, there were certain mantras you had to chant. If you wanted to have victory, certain other mantras. Now, the rulers of the land discovered this. And they collected people who knew the correct mantras and who knew how to organize the yaga with its correct temperature, correct fire and correct oblations. And with the help of these, they started winning victory after victory over their opponents. So these people became a privileged class very close to the rulers. In other words, in today's language, they had vested interests.
Because of intellectual property rights.
In those days, there was no intellectual property rights. And what happened was, the other people in the country started feeling that these are people having special privileges. What was this? Are we nobody? And this class of people felt that this was a dangerous section, which even dared to oppose them. So they whispered in the royal ear that these are all dissidents, reactionaries who would ultimately become revolutionaries. And the ruler drove them out of the country. Now they went because their intention was to have the same, I put it in today's language, right to information as those who are now close to the Maharaja. So they went to the forest. They sat down there in peace and started contemplating the divine. And as it always happens, the effects were there. Immediately they started getting the same vibrations, and they recorded this in what is called the Aranyakas. Aranya means forest. So the Aranyakas mean forest treatises.
So this is the first occasion where humans started documenting the divine principles.
Exactly. Nothing was documented. A small variation from that. It is all through word of mouth.
So remembered.
Remember.
Yeah.
They say that the Aranyakas were countless because as many people as they were Aranyakas, because each person saw God in his own way. So ultimately what happened was that these became smaller and smaller and smaller, and the most important Aranyakas alone were finally recorded. When we had this horde of foreign invaders, especially from the West, probably the Dutch and the English and the Portuguese, most of these documents vanished because they must have been written on palm leaf with an iron nail. And now there are a few Aranyakas which are preserved in our most, what shall I call it, wonderfully kept museums. When the young people in the land who were still yearning to get these powers, mind you, that was an age when youth had only one intention: to find contact with the divine. When they saw that these people had gone to the forest and that they had created a system where you could reach the divine, they followed them into the forest. This is very important. They went to them and they found these, I would call them sages or rishis or maharishis. Went to them and Upa, keep them at a higher level, Ni sat below them. That is how the word Upanishad developed. And the right to question, which till today prevails in Hinduism. You can ask any question to any master, you can challenge, and your head will still be on your neck. The questions that were asked and the replies that the rishis gave became the Upanishads. Some researchers say that there were 10,000 Upanishads. Again by word of mouth, those who listened, their memory probably was not so good, so it came right down to 1,008. From there further it came down to 108. And finally the great Adi Shankara came, who rescued Hinduism from a lot of things, Adi Shankara came and he picked up 10 of the best among this and he wrote treatises on them, and they are today recognized as the Upanishads according to Adi Shankara.
If you mention a few for the benefit of our viewers, most commonly known.
Most of the Upanishads, they are long, complicated Sanskrit names.
The names.
But you can say, the Taittiriya Upanishad.
That's right. Yes, few names like that.
Like that, Taittiriya Upanishad is my particular favorite, and then you have the number of other names. Anyway, these Upanishads were described by Swami Chinmayananda as a beautiful garden of flowers, because it was the divine mind touching the divine, transmitted through questions and answers to form a code of conduct and everything that rules this world. Chinmayananda, the great interpreter of the Upanishads, he said, this was like a garden of flowers. Flowers, because flowers always come from the mind, they are equated with the mind. And Chinmayananda said, when you want to give a present to somebody, a bouquet, you step into your garden and you select the flowers based on first its beauty, second its fragrance, and third its color contrast. Only when these three join, you get the perfect bouquet. And 700 of these brilliant flowers were collected, and you had the Bhagavad Gita. And people were fed up of being told things by then, that this Bhagavad Gita had to be interpreted as a conversation between one of the most brilliant characters which the human mind can envisage, Lord Krishna, and his closest friend, represented by the perfection in the human level, containing all the characteristics of ego, representing Arjuna. And some commentators, I partly agree with them, think that the totality of the Mahabharata was written as a framework of this diamond of the Bhagavad Gita. The 700 stanzas never fails to astonish me. I learned the Bhagavad Gita at the feet of my master, Swami Chinmaya. And I found that everything that he had said about the Gita had already been said by my divine master, Bhagavan Satya Sai Baba. Because Swami says, what you breathe, what you eat, what you drink, what you sleep, what you feel, this is all in the Bhagavad Gita. The word Bhagavad Gita means the song divine. So when the divine sings to you, irrespective of these 700 verses, you will be hearing the Bhagavad Gita. So this answers the question, how old is the Gita? How old is the Mahabharata war? There is no time, because any time your indweller, in the form of the beautiful blue boy of Vrindavan, asks questions to yourself, which is the ego, then the Bhagavad Gita automatically emerges. So the Bhagavad Gita has no age. It is happening here and now. I want this to be very clearly understood.
And in our hearts.
In your heart. I'll give you another small example. I asked a rather silly question to Chinmayananda. I said, Swami, I read in the Mahabharata that there were so many elephants, so many chariots. And Swamiji knows that a chariot is not merely a vehicle. It contains the entire living space and everything for the warrior, including his bedroom and his sleeping room and the kitchen and everything, and not merely 4 wheels. And this chariot, if it is placed in order as it is related in the Mahabharata, there will be no space in the what's called the Hindu belt to accommodate all these together, and hence the Mahabharata war was nothing but a figment of somebody's fevered imagination.
I think that's a very good point to take a short break, and we'll be back with you just in a few minutes.